afternoon, everybody. We are excited to see so many familiar names and faces. I am Janet Geddis. I own Avid Bookshop in Athens, Georgia, and I'm also on the SIBA board. And I'm going to be doing a little panel with Lynn Roberts of Square Books today, but our hope is that we are going to share a couple things about what we have found working well for our store in terms of staff engagement, and maybe perhaps hitting on some things that didn't work so well that we abandoned. But we'd really love for this to be a discussion, because we know that one of the richest parts of conferences like this are exchanging ideas with you all and hearing from each other. So, all right, so without further ado, I will just let you know a little bit about my store, my staff, and how I have learned to do a pretty good job at staff engagement. So I opened my store 10 years ago. Our anniversary is next month. In Athens, Georgia. It started out with just me and a couple part-timers. A few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, we got to the point where we had 2 stores and over 20 staff members. And then at the end of 2019, I closed one of my stores and really downsized, coincidentally, just in time for COVID. So it sort of worked out for us to be able to handle all the COVID stress with a smaller staff. But now I'm back down to 5 full-time people, including myself, and 1 part-timer who works about 25 or 30 hours from Florida. And that is our total staff now, and we're making it work. A few things that we have established and stuck with that are working really, really well for our staff are a quarterly check-in system. And this is something that I always knew was a smart thing to do, but I could never get it together to systematize it in a way to remind myself to actually schedule the check-ins. Also because I generally am kind of forgetful. I need 50 reminders for everything. And also because since I'm the owner of the store, I really wanted to involve a couple of my managers who maybe would get different feedback from staff members. So what I did, along with Rachel and Luis, who are the operations director and manager respectively, we set up a quarterly check-in system so that every other quarter, every staff member will meet with Luis, and the alternate quarters, they'll meet with Rachel or me. And that way you sort of set up, I use the term container, like there's a space where you and every particular employee know that at some point within 3 months, you're going to be able to address potential concerns that you have with one another. And these are, of course, non-urgent things. We found this to be especially helpful for our staff members that are a little quieter, who don't love being put on the spot when, say, at an all-staff meeting, I ask what people need from me. So it sort of serves a purpose where both we as managers and then the staff members themselves can kind of take notes and kind of think about what they want to talk about with us when they get to those check-ins. And it's set up as an expectation for anybody new that's hired. We let them know that this is part of our system. And then we put it on our Basecamp schedule. And Basecamp is what we use to communicate with each other online. And that is just sort of an understood part of the process. It has made the staff so much more comfortable talking with me and the managers, because there's still always going to be a division between if you're the owner of the store and the staff, but it sort of has lessened that division a little bit and made it so that I and Rachel and Luis are a little more approachable, because we do have this regular system where we're going to check in with you. It's not like once every 2 years you're going to get to talk with the boss. I know Lynn's going to touch on this too, but I try to remember that when I'm hiring somebody new, most people don't have the same connections to the book industry and the understanding of how it all works the way that I do. And so I try to filter out that the term is expert bias. So I just want to remember not to assume that everybody knows what I know. So I'd like to invite folks to, I like to introduce them to reps when they come to visit. If at all possible, I like to invite staff to regional conferences like this, whether they're online or in person. Business groups in Athens. I just want to make it clear to them that it's important to me that if they want to know more about the industry they're working in beyond the walls of Avid, I would like to give them access to that. And that lends to a greater sense of autonomy and investment in the job that they have. We also shout out work anniversaries and birthdays in Basecamp and just give an excuse to kind of cheer for each other. We also do regular staff meetings. We used to do it every quarter, and starting March 2020, we started doing a weekly meeting, which we know is a little bit cumbersome for staffs that are really small or really huge. We're kind of just the right size. But we meet once a week for a little less than an hour, and we always start with a mental health check-in, which allows our staff members to learn to rely on each other better, and also to sort of destigmatize the idea that mental health issues are any different from a physical health issue in terms of when you might need some extra support. And so that has created this environment where if one person says, I'm really having a tough time, I'm really anxious this week, another bookseller often will speak up and say like, hey, my workload's a little lighter than usual. Is there anything I can do to help you? So we just do a lot of that. It just sort of opens up the possibility of having more candid conversation if people are comfortable going there. We do not force people to tell us how they are doing mentally. And I noticed that over the weeks of doing this, it's now been a year and a half, people who were quiet at first tend to be much more outspoken now. And it's been a really good way of making sure people understand that I really do practice what I preach, that I really like to approach employees and coworkers as real human beings who have lives and strengths and frustrations outside of the walls of the bookshop. And I want to make sure that they know that I really care about them holistically, and that the better that they're doing holistically, the better they'll do in the store, and they'll be more fulfilled at work. And the last thing I kind of want to focus on as far as what Avid does is the working to trust that my employees can really wonderfully execute the tasks that are on their list because I hired them to do the job that I hired them for. We're good at hiring. And so I know for a few years there, especially when we expanded and I had a ton of people in my eye, 20 something people working for me where there used to be 2 part-timers, I got really overwhelmed and started micromanaging to a degree that I find really unappealing, but it was sort of the way my anxiety was manifesting. And so by working on that issue personally, and then also getting in better touch with the staff, I now have, there's so many more initiatives, ideas, sales numbers, sales opportunities that have come about because I learned a few years ago to back off and trust that people are doing the jobs that I hired them to do, and I don't need to check up on them all the time, that people are excited to be here, that they're proud to work at Avid Bookshop. And because we do have these other systems set up to regularly engage with the staff, there's very little chance that there's going to be a situation where I suddenly realize that someone hasn't been, doing XYZ for months at a time because we're in such regular touch with each other. But I also just don't need to check up on people anymore because we've come up with these systems that give folks space to really blossom in their roles, to have autonomy, to be creative. And that's related to also how we like to get everybody's vote in terms of what kind of things that we stock in the store. Gift items, surely, but definitely for store stock. So in addition to people mentioning in Basecamp or on Edelweiss if they really loved a book so that our buyer knows to stock it, we also have just an open PO on our point of sale system that's just called Restock. And any bookseller can add anything they want, regardless of the publisher, to that Restock PO. And then there's a little space to leave a note that might just say like, Adah loves this book. And then our buyer, Hannah, when she goes to divide up that PO, she's the one who has the expertise, who knows if, oh my gosh, this is impossible to get, or so-and-so just asked for the hardcover, but the paperback's coming out next month. I'm not going to order the hardcover, but she can kind of go through that. So people still have the ability to add to a Restock PO, but they're not ordering a bunch of store stock that's not necessary. So those are just a few things that we do, and I will now turn it over to Lynn.
Okay, hi. So I'm Lynn Roberts, and I'm the general manager of Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi, which is kind of a smallish town. And physically, we have a bit of an unusual situation because we are on the square in Oxford, which is the town center, and with the courthouse in the middle and all the business buildings facing the courthouse. And we actually occupy 3 of those buildings. So we have the main store another store we called Off Square Books, which is our lifestyle and leisure store and events. And then the third building has the kids store on the first level, and then Rare Square Books on the second level. So we have these sort of 3 buildings, 4 stores, 4 personalities that we present to people. And because we are in these 3 different buildings, we do lose some efficiency. So like I have to have somebody at a cash register at every store, whereas if we were everything was in the same building, it would be lovely. But it's not. And there are certainly some advantages to having these 3 different stores. But the staff to sales ratio is really higher than is ideal for that. We have 28 people that work on this in the store right now. And we also are in a college town. And so we get a lot of applications all the time. We give applications out anytime somebody comes to the store and they ask for one, we'll give it to them. There is like a test on it, and I can kind of tell whether somebody's a book person or not. It doesn't really matter whether they've answered the questions correctly or not, but I can figure that out from there. So we do have some of the senior staff has been here a long time, but then we do have a fair amount of turnover, every couple of years when someone graduates from college or finishes grad school. And so our turnover is mostly from people moving on in a good way. But, I do expect some of that. So, I was just kind of thinking when Janet was talking that I'm sort of the anti-Janet, who is kind of has everything together. And I spend a lot of my life just kind of like running around like this. But all of the stores, vary so much in how many staff people you have and your store culture and the ratio of part-time to full-time and, your community. So I don't feel like I can really even suggest things to other people, but I can sort of tell you what works for us and what is important for us. And for us, everybody that works here is a bookseller. So, and I also have this weird idea that if somebody reads, if they're a book person, that they can figure out how to do anything. That's turns out to not be true, but I still sort of operate on that principle. And what is important to the staff? Well, it's not money, because they wouldn't be working in a bookstore. Once upon a time, we could compete a little bit more with food service, but now wages have gone up, and especially during the pandemic, people are offering bonuses and many things that I can't do. So we do the best we can with money. And we try to make sure people are taken care of. We have a health insurance program that is mostly paid for by the store. We try to make to work with people with their schedule for classes or with children. We do give people a set schedule so they're not working on demand like a lot of the larger corporations and retail outlets just sort of call people to come in to work in 3 hours, and we treat people better than that. So basically, everybody that works here at Square Books works because they want to and because they're a book person. It's actually what we say about Amazon too a lot, that all the people that shop at our store really could just as easily go online and shop. Everybody knows how to do that. But the people that shop here because they want to, and because they find that we have some benefit for them. And we think that about the staff here, that they work here because they are book people and they enjoy the environment. And the best thing for us to do is just try to keep on keeping that environment healthy and a good place for them. And there are four kind of things that I think that are important with keeping our staff engaged and involved. And one of them is not money. So I wish we could offer more money, but that's not really the case right now. And unfortunately, that does mean that some people that who would be fantastic booksellers are not able to work here. But what we try to do is give everyone the tools to be a professional bookseller if they want to. There are many, we have a number of part-time staff people, and sort of varying levels depending on how much time they have, their interest in the book industry. Some people are really into, wanting to know how it works and wanting to know all about agents and editors, and other people just want to read books. So we have an Edelweiss account, and I created a new Edelweiss account for every person that works here. And it's their choice how much time they want to spend on that. But they also, we sign them up for ABA and SIBA so they can have access to those websites. And we share advanced reading copies are in a sort of a library in the back room, and everyone's encouraged to help themselves to those. And we encourage shelf talkers and newsletter blurbs. And we also participate in Libro FM. And so all the booksellers here have bookseller accounts too. So we want to make sure that everyone has sort of that agency and access to the books, and being aware of what titles are coming out and what's going to be sort of exciting in the book business. Otherwise, responsibility. Everyone who works here will, once they're trained as a bookseller, will take on additional responsibilities. Those can be really small. Those can be the advanced reading copy librarian, the person that is responsible for getting rid of the June arcs and making sure that all the June is together and all August is together. It can be somebody who's responsible for changing the books out of the window so they don't get too faded. We have a gumball machine that has like little baubles in it with odd little things and quotes, and there's someone that's responsible for that. So I'm not necessarily talking about responsibilities like marketing or the book buyer. We have those, but just things that part-time people can do and take responsibility for. We also try to establish an environment of an egalitarian environment, equality. We don't, everyone, we do start with that principle that everyone at the store is a bookseller. So I'm not super crazy about job titles like assistant manager. We do have some duties like marketing director, which we only call it a marketing director because because of publishers that come to us. and for actually sort of outside contact. But sorry, I'm not sure. Somebody was in the office. I'm not sure why. And guess what? All the staff feels free to walk into this office at any time. But we do have a small coffee shop. Everybody takes turns making coffee, doing dishes. I do it. Richard Howarth does it. We'll take out trash. It's just no one feels like that they are too important to do some of the lowest jobs. And therefore, everybody in the store is equally important. The last thing that is very important is the store community. And this is where we are kind of hit hardest by COVID, because we have not been able to spend time together in a group. In the past, we've had an annual holiday party right at the beginning of holiday season to get everybody kind of, a special fancy dinner, and everybody gets dressed up, and sometimes we dance, and it's great fun, but we haven't been able to do that, and we won't be able to do that this year either. I'm hoping that'll come back. But those sort of fun, non-professional associations really help build a sense of community with the staff. We do have an annual staff meeting, usually in the fall, and we will be having that very soon. First, it's a little difficult because we do have a sort of extended store hours, so it can be hard to find a time when everybody can get together without closing the store. That we try to keep that staff meeting short and with refreshments, and basically it's a time when somebody can sort of air big grievances, but mostly it's pep talk and talking about how a state of the store address, like this is where we are this year, this is where we need to be at the end of the year. And let's see, that is pretty much all my thoughts on all that. That it's really these four different principles with the equality, community, agency, and I forgot the other one. And responsibility too. So there we go. And that's really all I have to say. And I'm excited to hear about other people's ideas or questions or suggestions.
Anyone feeling brave or daredevil-y? Want to tell us kind of maybe something that did or did not work for you in the last year or two? I think, sorry, I can't always tell people are on mute on purpose or on accident. I think so one of the things Lynn just mentioned about like the state of the store address, that's one thing that I have found. I don't know why I was surprised to find this, but I was surprised early in my career that the people who didn't own the store still wanted to know how we were doing financially, how the puzzle pieces fit together in terms of what we ordered and what we didn't. And so having staff really aware of, they don't know the nitty gritty of exactly how much we owe to every publisher at any given time, but they kind of understand where we stand generally with publishers and how the system works. And that has really led to a deeper understanding of, say, like why people get paid what they get paid. I also share, as a percentage of sales, I share what my salary is and what different positions are. And I think too, one thing Lynn really hit on was how much, I think we also do this, and all the faces I'm seeing, you do this at your stores too. You hire people who really love books. And I think that one thing that has really been emphasized in the larger world in the last year and a half is that a lot of people are reevaluating how they want to spend their work days. And so I do think those of us who are providing good working environments where people are surrounded with things they love and they're doing work that they deem important, that really bodes well for those of us who work in the book industry and hire book lovers. I think we're able to give an opportunity for each book lover to really love what they do for 20, 30, 40 hours a week. And that's really a rare thing I'm coming to learn. See, Kelly has a question. Hello, Kelly.
Hey, I feel like I haven't seen you in a long time. How are you, everybody? I want to just echo the transparency about the financials for the bookstore and sharing that. I find that a lot of tension is created with the staff. If you're, I mean, if anything, I maybe overshare a little bit with my staff, but I find that they're more comfortable with that than being in the dark and like, maybe we get cut off, we're over our credit limit with a certain publisher or something like that, and they don't understand what their favorite book is in, just simple things like that, but also sort of a long range and short range goals and what would help today, how they can contribute to maybe getting us out of a uncomfortable financial situation, or how it might turn better. I've also learned some hard lessons about, as an owner manager, taking my hand off the wheel for too long, and not touching base with people enough. And so I'm really, I'm listening to a lot of what Janet's saying about her plans, and also Lynn with the emphasizing the equality of everyone on staff too. We're attempting to move to all full-time staff with benefits, and it's really tough. It is super tough, but and right now our full-time staff is 3 people, including myself, and we have 1 part-time and 1 really part-time. But this is very helpful. Thanks.
And Rebekah had her hand raised.
Hi, I'm Rebekah from Boogie Down Books in New York City, and I wanted to echo what Janet said about doing quarterly individual meetings with employees. I do one-on-one quarterly meetings with with every member of my team. And one thing that I did before we started it that was really helpful was I actually surveyed them on how they like to receive feedback best, so that in those conversations, I could make sure that the feedback conversation was attuned to what worked best for them. So for example, one member of my team really likes to receive written feedback before we have the conversation so that she can really think about it and prepare in advance. And another member of my team really likes to receive constructive feedback first and then positive feedback afterwards, because he really likes for our conversation to end on a high note. And so I really recommend checking in with your team members if you're going to have one-on-one conversations with them, just to make sure that the conversation is attuned to how they like to receive feedback and how they want to engage in those conversations.
Can you share the resource that you used for that questionnaire? Or was it something you made up?
Yeah, it was a Google survey, but I'll share the team facing version of it in the chat in just a second. Absolutely.
Thanks, Rebekah.
And there's a question from Jessica Stockton with Greenlight.
Yes,
Go ahead, Jessica, you can ask.
Sorry, I'm in the office, so I don't want to talk too loud. Everybody's working at their desks. But we've gone back and forth about how to do all staff meetings, because we don't want to overburden people's time. We also have kind of long hours, but we don't want to go too long without those big check-ins. And then when you're there, how do you structure it to make it the most productive, so people get a chance to have their voices heard, so you can also share the information that needs to happen? So I'd love to hear from different folks how they're doing it.
do we have any attendees who would like to give feedback on that?
I can share. I'm not sure it's applicable to a store your size, but there's some things I think that would be that we always start with the gross stuff first, like if there's gross stuff happening or not happening, get the bad news out of the way. You can say hi, check in with everybody. Anybody got any, burning concerns you want to get off your chest right away. And then we say, here's some issues we got to address. Anybody have any solutions? And then we go over just, what's going on in the store that everybody needs to be aware of. We try not to address anything that can be addressed in smaller meetings with just the people that are concerned. And then we go with a roundabout of staff picks, but you cannot do that with 50 people. It's a real bonding moment for the store to finish with what brought us all here in the first place. But I don't know what you're going to do with that. Maybe you can play.
Maybe we could do it in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to end each of our Zoom meetings, which are weekly, for a little less than an hour. We would end it with, "What are you reading now?" But once we reopened our store in August, after months of being closed, it just was too much to do, "What are you reading?" So we just have a base camp check-in now that once a week ask people what they're reading. And Jessica, I think I've tried like every format of staff meeting possible over the years. And I know when we used to do like quarterly in-person meetings, it was hard when we had 2 stores and a bunch of people and everybody with conflicting schedules. And so I would require the meeting, but then I'd feel a little bit torn about requiring a meeting at 8 o'clock at night for somebody that only works in the morning. Anyway, so we eventually got our footing, but I just would create an agenda. Like, I'm a big procrastinator. I wish I weren't, but I am. But I would create an agenda based on kind of what I had noticed were the kind of themes over the last few months of things that kept popping up again and again. And like Kelly said, like, are there a couple things I'm noticing that are not specific to one bookseller, but it seems to be like, there's a way of shelving that people aren't shelving the way that they were initially trained to. Is that something I can quickly cover? And we try to do like the feel good stuff, and also always have an element, whether this is our weekly Zoom meeting or the quarterly meeting we used to have in person when I had 2 stores. We would have always a couple examples of customer service interactions, and kind of if maybe you weren't thrilled with how you dealt with it, what you do in the future, and maybe get feedback, but never without any judgment about like, oh my God, this person messed up and really got this customer mad. It was just like, did you have a situation you wish you had handled better? Let's talk it through. And then we share a bunch of things that worked out really well. And it's also always at our staff meetings, I frequently will emphasize that I trust the booksellers to take care of customers in the way that they need to be taken care of. So there's not like sort of like that corporate thing Lynn was mentioning about all the things that come with corporate retail. Like if somebody feels that a customer is really frustrated, they have permission to give them a $5 coupon to use next time. They don't have to run it through a manager who's then going to ask me and fill out a form. Like, so I think also just using those meetings, I always use that as a way to say like, here, like a few general reminders I have about how we want to run the store, but everything is always couched in like that sort of Simon Sinek approach of like, why do we do these things? So if I'm reviewing why we shelf books the way we shelf, I'm not just like, this is the way we do it because it looks pretty, but it's like, why do we do it like this? Why does it matter if it's pretty? And just sort of tying everything back that we address in big staff meetings back to the whole reason that we're in this job in the first place. And that leads to change. And also people feel really good after the staff meetings end. I'm not sure how helpful that was, but does anybody else have good feedback for Jessica or lessons learned you wouldn't do again? I see Rebekah put the communication and feedback preference survey in there. Thank you. I remember we did one of those like communications. It was like the 5 languages of communication in the workplace or something. And that's when I found out one of my booksellers from years ago hated to be singled out on social media or thanked in person if somebody else was in earshot, which is like, I love that. Like you can tell me all day how good a job I did taking care of a customer. But if we mentioned to her and someone else is in earshot, she hated it. And I didn't know until we did that feedback session. And so we stopped. I just would privately send her a message and be like, good job with so-and-so. And she'd say, thanks. But yeah, it's really fascinating how different everybody can be within one building. I see Adah in the chat asked if anybody uses incentives of any kind. That has never really worked for us, other than like, if we hit this sales goal, we'll all have a pizza party. But I think it's also kind of, because our staff is so engaged, anything that smacks of competition, they won't do because they feel bad if they're going to like win over somebody else. So it's a little hard. But does anybody here in this group do any kind of incentive program for their staff?
So, you know, we do have an annual bonus, but it's not performance based. It's Richard was very just gave everybody a small little cash bonus for being vaccinated. So that was great. But I do think, you know, whatever we get from publishers, we share with the staff. So I try not to hoard the best ARCs, try not to hoard, you know, Anthony Doerr, whoever, and just, you know, share this with the staff. And when we get the, you know, funky t-shirt or whatever, we just kind of throw that out to whomever. And of course, you know, our booksellers, they all get a discount when they make purchases at the store. So I do think of all those as kind of incentives and rewards for book people. And it's also, and it may be different for other people's point of sale systems, but I really can't tell with really, like, you know, an actual figure, like who is selling the most books. So it's not quite like, you know, selling cars, where I can tell, you know, who's really, you know, bringing in the bucks. And I feel like everybody has their place, you know, and they're to the ultimate goal of selling lots and lots of books. But I can't really tell who's like really working it on the floor, and therefore I can't really do anything that's like really specifically sales tied in for any sort of incentive or bonus.
I am curious about the like pizza party collective kind of goal meeting. Is that something that you've done consistently, Janet, or that was?
We've done it a handful of times over the years. I mean, we've certainly not done it since COVID has been a thing, but yeah, just sort of like creating a sales goal. And that's another thing, like I was saying before, how I said it in the chat, like I want to be super organized. I'm pretty organized. I've learned to be, but like, it's because I hire people who are good at being organized that we're able to do this stuff. But that's something that once we kind of normalize a little bit, I would love to actually set a set schedule of like reminder, set the sales goal for the month or the quarter, whatever it is. Because if I don't put in a reminder, then a year's going to go by and I'd be like, oh, I forgot to set a sales goal so we could do a pizza party. So I think I will, after we finish this meeting, set those reminders up for starting in 2022. But it was really fun because everybody benefited from the winnings and kind of pitched in together to help. And also I was thinking just this week about the kind of thing Lynn was saying about trying to figure out if I never have done commission, but even if I wanted to, like, it feels like there's too much luck. Like the one big spender happens to come in on a Wednesday morning instead of a Friday night. Like, so we don't do any kind of thing like that. And also it just, I don't know, it gets the staff all pumped up to kind of work at a goal together. I did notice today when I was in the office though, that there's a big chalkboard in the office that says like goals for subscriptions and sales goals. And we have like a thermometer thing, and they're both for March 2020. And that was when we were gonna like start really focusing on a sales goal per month and selling as many subscriptions as we can. And like, it's just still up there. So it's never too late to try new things. And I think too, one thing that has been really exhausting is to think about doing any more pivoting or changing. I think especially for everybody here has a tremendous amount of responsibility. And so I know that hearing me and Lynn and the others here just like throwing out the things that we've done, I imagine if I were in your position, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't do any of that. I can barely like get my basic to-do list done. And that's okay too. Like all of these things, this all took me a decade to do, and we're probably going to be really different a decade from now. But any little shifts you can do and any conversations you can open up and have with staff, and like, even if it's just like, oh, twice a year instead of a quarterly check-in, just something little you can shift to be in better touch with staff, I think would be really good. And also for me, it gives me a better sense of control. Like I was under more stress before we established these systems because I never really knew exactly what was going on. So it wasn't just like the control freak side of me. It was just like, I own a business and I think everyone's happy, but I'm not sure. And I usually just knew when someone was very unhappy or very happy, but I didn't get the in between. And so like setting all this up, like it was a lot of work, but it saved so much time and energy and fretting and worry over the long term. Because if there are any issues with staff, they pop up much sooner and before they've gotten to the point where anybody feels really disregarded or really frustrated with me or just like hating work or anything. Like we catch all that early because of the system. So it's worth all the time that it takes to set these reminders up so that you can avoid heartache and frustration and having to repair deeply damaged relationships down the line.
I think we have time for one more question or comment or advice.
Oh, Kelly, looks like we're out of time. No, just, Kelly put a comment in there. Can you talk about the role your staff handbook plays in your management? I would say that for us, we haven't had to refer to it for tough conversations in a long time. We do refer to it generally when we're trying to figure out like why someone is doing something a little different. We go back to the handbook. It has given me a good degree of comfort and helped a lot when we have had to have difficult conversations, asking someone to change their behavior and or having to let somebody go, to just know for sure, like this isn't just my gut feeling that someone isn't doing things right. It's that we've gone back. And so I can feel really confident in the occasional tough decision we have to reprimand somebody or have to let somebody go. That's sort of a dark way of ending things, but and also like with all of this, it's like with the transparency, like it feels so much better to know that everybody who works here has the same set of rules and understandings of what's going on. And if they're ever confused, they can go back to some system that we've created for them to refer to. So it just feels like just a lot of clarity. Like our best friend Brene says, clear is kind. So the clearer our expectations can be written out for people, it's easier for you and for them.
I'll end on a little bit of a positive note, that I think that among probably this group and most groups, your staff is going to fall into either you have a staff that's really like family, like everybody is tight, or you have a team. And I don't think that those are necessarily the same. But I think that, as long as you get everybody kind of feeling a part of something bigger and understanding the importance what they do as booksellers, which goes beyond even your store, that we're doing good work. And I think that when people feel that and feel that, that importance of that, then they will perform better and they'll feel better and want to contribute more.
Thank you, Lynn. And thank you, Janet.